It's been quite a while since dot teams have been the forefront of discussion in StarRail, and well, that's because since Black Swan's release back in February of this year, nothing's really changed, except for, I guess, E2 Jiaochu. Well, now with StarRail's newest fancy little 3-character banner, we're seeing the first rerun of Black Swan, as well as the third rerun of Kafka going on at the exact same time, and it raises the question of whether dot is still worth investing in right now. Now, it isn't a secret that even the premium dot team has been outdone a little bit. It went from arguably being the best team in the game when Black Swan first released to now having to compete against the insane break teams we have in the game, the insane upgrades the follow-up teams have been getting, and then there have been some really strong hyper carries like Yunli and Acheron. I think it's pretty fair to say right now against these newer teams, dot isn't really shining as much and will probably struggle to compete at a similar investment. Now, does that mean Kafka and Black Swan are just easy skips then, and you should just ignore them? Well, not necessarily. What I think dot has going for it, which is super important, is that it's a recognized team archetype. Kafka and Swan aren't characters that just happen to work well together, they were specifically designed for a dot team. Horrorverse also consistently has dot turbulences in Pure Fiction, MOC, and Apocalyptic Shadow, and anytime there's one of those combat events, there's always a stage that has a dot buff and gives you trial dot characters. Being recognized as a team archetype that Horrorverse themselves are promoting is extremely important, because that means Hoyo will keep giving dot stuff that works for them, whether it be new relic sets, new light cones, or new characters. For an easy example of why this is super important, just take a look at our follow-up teams. Topaz back in 1.4 on her release, let's be honest, didn't have a lot of use cases. She was kind of just given to us as this character with a lot of potential, but not many teams to fit in. Dr. Ratio in 1.6 kind of gave us a clue as to where they were going, as Topaz and Ratio fit together pretty well as a dual DPS combo. Aventurine then showed up in 2.1 as the premier sustain, and then Robin in 2.2 as the premier support. Now you can tell a very similar story about the dot characters starting with Kafka, but the next part that happens to follow-ups is very important to why you shouldn't give up on dot. Our shiniest, newest character, Fei Xiao, is another follow-up character, and she isn't here to play in a different vacuum like Yunli. She's by all means a character that replaces Dr. Ratio in the premium follow-up team. If we look at our premium dot team now, it looks pretty good and is a very synergistic team, but I'd honestly argue that Ranmei and Ho especially can get easily replaced by newer, more dot-focused characters. They both are really good and have kits that complement the dot playstyle perfectly, but they aren't designed to specialize in dot, similar to how Robin is designed to specialize in follow-up teams. This basically means while it might feel like dot has hit its peak and it's just going to go in a downward spiral because stronger teams are going to just keep getting released and content's going to get harder, we will almost absolutely see a dot comeback eventually when Hoyo decides it's time to look at them again. Now, whether you should pull for dot now is a bit more of a complicated question. In terms of its current strength, dot is still a pretty strong team that can clear all content. It's also a really versatile team, which is really important as it doesn't struggle in any particular game mode. In Simulated Universe, it has a specific path, the Nihility path, dedicated to just buffing dot. Now, most of the time, dot is going to be your average generic good team. It's not going to have the raw damage of like a Fei Xiao or Firefly team, but it's going to be just a tier or two below that. Now, whenever there's a dot turbulence though, which is honestly quite often, dot can actually be very strong and the ideal team for clearing the content, which is super nice. I think the easiest way to see if it's worth it for you is to just have a look on YouTube. Dot has been in the game for a while now, so there's a plenty of showcases with every level of investment in like all endgame content. So find someone who's done a showcase with the investment you're going to end up having and see if that damage in gameplay is something you're going to be happy with. Now, between Kafka and Black Swan, which one should you pull if you're not willing to fully commit or if you don't have the jades to? Well, it's gonna be Kafka. I have a full video I did a while back on why Kafka is so future-proof, so you can check that out if you want some more detail. But basically, Kafka's ability to trigger dots is incredibly unique and basically essential for dot teams. Even if someone in the future were to get a similar mechanic, it would be very likely that they wouldn't just replace Kafka on the team, but replace one of the other characters, whether it be Black Swan or Ranmei, and you would run 2 dot triggers. Now, arguably, a bigger reason of why Kafka is a safe pick is because because of how important she is in the story. We haven't seen her in a while, and while the new community hot topic has been Firefly, and I guess Fei Xiao as well more recently, Kafka was hugely popular at the start of Star Rail. This is a character with an enormous fanbase, has a mysterious yet important connection to our very own Trailblazer, and is kind of a secondary leader figure for arguably the second most important faction in the game. This is not a character that Hoyoverse is going to let fade away into obscurity in the game, and that includes keeping her somewhat relevant in the meta. Now, the only way I could see this argument backfiring is if Hoyoverse goes down the path of March 7th and Dan Heng, where they actually re-release Kafka into a different element and path. This does seem super unlikely to happen soon, but you never know in the future. So basically, to summarize, Dot is still good. You can still pull them if you want, it'll be perfectly strong. Dot also has the potential to get stronger in the future, because Hoyoverse does recognize it as a team archetype, says they will receive more stuff to work with. And if you only cannot get one of them, get Kafka.